IBC team, I think. No, I don't think I saw Susanna on the call. Anyone from Binary Builders? I don't know if Mike was on the call. And informal, Ethan couldn't make it today anyways, but we'll keep him posted after. From the DA side, Celestia Node.
Yeah, I'm here, Ramen.
Renee's
Awesome.
here.
And from Iger, welcome. And from Iger,
Hey, we are here with Mikołaj.
awesome. Welcome. So for updates on the working group, I think the biggest update is CIP4. ZK working group's call is tomorrow. They only had a kickoff call last week, 2 weeks ago, so I don't think they have much updates. And I think the interface working group, they have a call in a few weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. So I don't think there's any updates from their side since the last call. But I think the biggest update is from the DA working group, whereas CIP4 is today going to go to final. And I think Renee, you might had a question for me about like, scoping out once it goes to final, like how do you activate it and stuff. Within Celestia node and Iger, I think the client is called Lumina. Yeah, Lumina's. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, the question was when we could ship it as a release. So we have the feature ready to implement the sampling window, at least for light clients or light nodes. And it's ready to go. So basically we can release it as soon as it's like considered finalized. At least from the
So
Celestia
today's
node.
sounds good. So today it will be considered final because today's the date. Last call, I think. Today is the 7th, right?
So is it fine technically to release after this call then?
Yeah, and then we'll make a pull request and stuff. What I'm trying to think about though is actually no, the 7th is tomorrow, but I think like I don't think there's any feedback given that the DA working group is all aligned on this. The one feedback I would have is maybe on trying to capture everything that you guys are activating on the releases. So like it sounds like CIP4 is going being included in a release. So maybe we can work on like within the working group, like Ramin, maybe there should be like a README that says which CIPs are activated on the client and stuff, and just like maybe just a bullet point or something, so that's easier to track and stuff from each working group. But it sounds like it's ready for release.
Yeah, I mean, so just to clarify, like there's only like a component of CIP4 that's ready for release, which is the light node side of things, which is implementing a window for light node sampling. The other side of the coin for CIP4 is to allow full nodes to prune data that is beyond the sampling window.
I see. Okay.
So it's kind of like a two-part thing.
Got it.
So it's only partially implemented and partially ready for release, but we'll clarify obviously in the release notes what exactly is being changed there. And
Sounds
then
good.
and we can link it in a README. That's also fine.
Yeah, that sounds good. Maybe clarify, Ramin and Renee. I don't know if you guys have because we talked about a repo for the DA working group, like just a simple README file with like and links to notes and stuff. Maybe capture it within the README file, like maybe CIP4 is partially implemented until later on when it becomes fully implemented. Just it makes it easier for everyone to track, I think. But I mean, other than that, it all sounds fine. The other question I think was about releases related to testnet and stuff. I mean, I don't have a strong opinion on that. I think whatever works best for both Iger and Celestia node.
Yeah, I think I will mark, for this release, we'll mark exactly what it's compatible with because this is a very subjective, like this release will be subjective. It's non-breaking. So you upgrade to participate in the new behavior. And therefore you can run it on any test network or even on mainnet. But moving forward, if there is something breaking, then we will have to make notes in the release about what it's currently compatible with, unless there's a better way to do this.
So I think this is fine for. Okay, go ahead.
I have a comment about CIP4 in the reference implementation. This is storage node. So if you scroll down to storage pruning, it says that they discard stored data outside the 30-day availability window, But isn't it 30 days plus 1 hour?
It should be.
Yeah.
Okay,
I,
it'll be
I
good
can update that. I'll open PR and update that.
Sounds good.
Okay. Renee, for what you were mentioning before about, like releases and notes, I think it works fine for now. Maybe we can, like within the DA working group, maybe we can specify something different if it, or if it needs to be. But I think for now this works.
Yeah, okay.
Cool. Exciting. The first CIP going to final. Jacques, maybe we should start the PR so that we can merge it by tomorrow at least. We'll just have to update last call to final, and we'll remove this the last call deadline. And yeah, we'll merge it tomorrow. All right.
Yeah, sorry. Regarding the questions to Lumina, yes, it's called Lumina, and
Yes.
we are aware of CIP4, but we are still working on having Dasher. So no actual sampling yet on our side. So we will only implement this after the Dasher, I think.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, I'm excited about using Lumina with Dassler. All right. Then let's go to so the next on the agenda, I think CIP6 it was first moved to last call, but then yesterday or today there were updates to it to add I think it was a governance parameter. I think Callum is best to go over it. So if you're updating something when it's in last call, it has to go back to review status because you're adding to the specification. So Callum, we don't have to go over CIP6, but maybe go over the changes you added and stuff.
I'll talk about this just
Okay,
because
or Evan,
Column's
yeah.
internet isn't very good at the moment. Although Column is definitely leading this change. So the reason for adding the governance parameter is basically just to have like a decently fast way to change the price enforcement. So like the minimum fee that's consensus critical in a decently quick way without having a hard fork. So the general social consensus so far has just been like without some sort of mechanism that doesn't require a hard fork, or at least being able to, having the ability to avoid coordinating a hard fork, then this kind of change is kind of DOA, and so that's the first part, is that we have to add a consensus, or we have to add a governance parameter, and then this change in general. We're sort of deprioritizing, or we haven't reached social consensus yet on what a good mechanism for the fee market would be, because we don't really have full blocks at the moment, so it's very difficult to actually gauge what would be a good mechanism. Like everything sort of feels like maybe a premature optimization. It's difficult to know which direction is to go. But this is a very safe manual bet. It gets us a lot of the things that we want. We being royal we here, and doesn't involve having a hard fork. It's very simple. And in the future, after blocks are filled, then I think we'll move towards something that's more like a normal fee market mechanism, something similar to EIP 1559, just in the sense that the minimum fee is dynamic and it's deterministic. It's not based on governance.
Okay. Any feedback, any questions to Evan about CIP6 adding a governance parameter?
No, not from my end. It's good to know that we have to we have to go back to the review status. That makes total sense.
Okay. So let's keep the review status in case there's other folks might have feedback on this. But in my opinion, if we don't have any feedback by, I guess, next week or by the next call, we can start the last call, move it to last call if you guys don't have any more feedback or changes you want to add to the specs.
Cool. Sounds good.
Awesome. Alrighty, exciting. Let's go to CIP 9. So I just want to go over the ones in review status. So this is one by Alex Cheng,
Yep.
the packet forward middleware. It's still in review status. I just want to see if there's any updates on it. Like, are you guys good with what it is right now? Do you want to move it to last call so we can just get some rough consensus on moving it to last call, or is it not ready, etc.?
Yeah, I would love to move it to last call. Since the last meeting, there have been no new comments on the forum post. Seems like everyone's on board. Yeah, I would love to move this forward.
Sounds good. So I would need to get the rough consensus of the core dev, including like Evan speaking on behalf of core and app, because of this will be going into core and app. So can we get some feedback from the core devs on moving this to last call? Moving it to last call means just like so we can see that it's ready at least for one final review before we make it like the final specs.
Yep, I think it's ready.
Cool. Awesome. All right. So CIP 9 will move to last call. We'll put it for 2-week period. With a period ending in 2 weeks. Whether it's the Tuesday or Wednesday, I'll talk to you guys about this toward the end of the call. Just to make sure that because some people getting feedback that Tuesday may not even work for them at the timing, and Wednesday was better. So we'll talk about that after. Now let's move to CIP 10. That is coordinated network upgrade. Callum, I just wanted to get feedback on that. I don't know if there's any new changes added to it, but if not, and it's still in review status, that's fine. We can leave it as is until there's, in case you guys are still speccing out anything and stuff, but we can skip it, but just let me know if that's the case or not.
There's like one modification we're looking at doing, which is adding like a minimum height, like a buffer time before we can actually upgrade. So I think that's still being discussed, but apart from that, nothing else has changed. Okay, and for the minimum height, is it added to the CIP 10, or you plan on adding that once you guys have an idea on the design? Yeah, we haven't yet talked about the design yet. Once we have an idea about that, we'll add it to the CIP likely. All right, sounds good. So yeah, just keep us posted. We'll keep it in review status for now. Coordinated network upgrades. Let's move to CIP 12. I don't believe the authors of CIP 12 are on this call, but feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if Aditya is on the call. If not, we can move ahead. Okay, sounds like it. Okay. So now that we covered stuff that are existing, one other thing that was kind of like tricky for me personally that I want to talk about with the group was in the example of CIP 15, where CIP 15 I'll show you CIP 15. It was written by Rutul, basically to modify governance parameters for the memo field. So the one thing that came up when I was talking to Rutul was it's very hard for us to integrate on-chain governance processes with the CIP process, because the CIP process as it is today, it doesn't take into account that, okay, if you modify an on-chain governance parameter, there's a mechanic that happens on-chain to actually activate it and stuff. So I wanted to share that kind of feedback with the group about what would be the long-term kind of roadmap around on-chain governance parameters and whether it makes more sense to have them be more like hard fork activated versus on-chain governance mechanic. Because currently, as it is today, on-chain governance and the voting, coin weighted voting mechanism is not scoped out within the CIP process, right? Because the way we go about activating technical features is through rough consensus, not necessarily through token weighted or coin weighted voting. So I wanted to open it up for the group to have that kind of conversation about resolving on-chain governance parameters which are not scoped out within the CIP process within the CIP process, because otherwise it becomes kind of very awkward. You have a process that exists outside the CIP process that anyone can use to modify on-chain governance parameters without necessarily participating in the CIP process. So
Yeah, that question came up, and I figured it's better if we have a conversation about it, or just let you know that we're actually thinking about this a lot more. Any thoughts? Any feedback? Any opinions?
Was there a GitHub discussion about this somewhere?
No, there's no GitHub discussion. This is more like a high level. There's no like specs to talk about when it comes to that, but yeah.
I guess there are some parameter changes which don't require much discussion. I'm just thinking about updating an IBC client, for example. So I guess most parameter changes we'd want to have, in the forum, part of a CIP, and then once that is approved, we then go forward with that on chain. But maybe not all of them.
Yeah, there's that one came up about the IBC related kind of governance parameters not necessarily needing a CIP process, and it makes sense.
Yeah, I think just to echo some of the sentiment that I've heard elsewhere is just that like you definitely like governance proposals are very separate and token voting is very separate and still like useful in some ways. So like it's anyone can submit a proposal and it's anyone can vote on a proposal, and if for some reason social consensus disagrees with that, like it's a very contentious thing or whatever occurs, then I mean social consensus always wins out in the end, no matter what, like on any chain. So if social consensus really disagrees with a governance vote that gets passed, then I think it will have to handle that at that point in time. But like, I don't know. That's just what I've heard. Is that right? They're both very separate processes. Initially, I thought that it would be good to sort of just have one spot, but given since they're so separate and they do very different things, then I do think it makes sense to just keep them separate in general.
I think this should be still discussed as a CIP, and that okay, we can still it's still a proposal, and I guess it only really counts as being passed when it actually gets approved on chain. So it's dependent on votes.
So I think this was always
definitely
a misconception of the CIP process. Just to clarify, the original intention of the CIP process before pre-mainnet was never that on-chain proposals should go through the CIP process. Just to clarify, that was as what the original intention was.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the awkwardness comes from the fact that on-chain governance kind of takes over some scope within the CIP process, even if the CIP process doesn't take over on-chain governance processes as a mechanic. So it becomes kind of like an awkward dynamic where like on-chain governance can take over some of the scope because of like, core related tracks, even though it's not part of the CIP process.
It would be fine if on-chain proposals were just on the forum. I just think they need at least one preferably canonical place that they can be discussed, that there can be some sort of like initial agreement on before they get proposed on chain. It doesn't have to be a CIP, but it needs to be somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that's kind of becomes awkward is, let's say we all like, everyone in the group, like, the core dev call, like all the core contributors align on an activation or like a feature modification for the blockchain that requires on-chain governance. But then the coin weighted voting mechanic that happens after doesn't align with what rough consensus aligns with, right? Because that's like more like, the network voting based on your coin weight, which might not necessarily have the best context on technical implementation per se. So that becomes like an awkward dynamic where you want to activate a change and coin weighted voting doesn't align with it for any random reason, right? So there has to be a way to figure out how to align them without necessarily maybe including. So what I'm trying to say, there's probably like several different approaches you can take. One, you can create a CIP that covers the entire on-chain governance mechanic, right? And that will kind of like could be like CIP1. It becomes a living document, right? And it covers the entire mechanic of on-chain governance mechanism or processes, right? The problem's still the same, where even if you have a CIP, kind of like CIP 15 by Retool, where you're activating or modifying like a range, or I mean, maybe you just modify, you have a range for a governance parameter and you're just modifying the value within that range that was scoped out, it would still probably, the vote, like the coin weighted voting might not align with the outcome of rough consensus. The other approach would be to slowly, potentially with the working group, had governance parameters over time activated only via hard fork if they need to be modified. So there's several approaches here. So one would, and the second approach is good in a way because then slowly over time, on-chain governance parameters become included within the CIP process because then they would only need to be activated via hard fork. Any thoughts? Any opinions on it?
Yeah, I feel like I kind of like the second approach you just alluded to because it's like kind of a stepping stone where when we realize we need to modify a parameter, or rather a SIP wants to modify a parameter, then to implement the modification of that parameter, we can move the authority of modifying that parameter from token voting governance to the SIP process. And for parameters that are like not super important or don't actually need to be changed frequently, or like they can remain under the authority of token voting governance for now. So concretely, that's what SIP 15 was modified to do, is take those two parameters and move them from governance modifiable to governance unmodifiable, and like explicitly set via hard forks.
I do think that like a on-chain governance stuff will move quicker generally than hard forking. And I do think, especially if we're trying to keep single binary syncs, there will eventually be a cost to having so many forks if we're just constantly doing it for every single parameter change. So I think we probably will still want to have some stuff that is governance changeable, especially in the case of some sort of like emergency where we want to change it quickly. And that there is, it's a very like obvious change, and will be general consensus around it. I also think just generally it's hard to make CIP the authority. CIP is like a coordinating mechanism. The real authority in most upgrades are the validators. It's about convincing the validators. Of course, we can always fork out the validators in the extreme case if there is some real like turmoil, but it's up to the developers, which are themselves a small cabal of people, to convince the wider token holders that these changes are good. And so, it should be on us to make sure that when a proposal is put forward, that all those token holders are aware of what the changes are and largely in agreement.
Yep. Okay, so a few points. I do want to avoid the word authority because I don't think that's the intention. It's more about scope, right? So one has a different kind of scope than the other in terms of how the mechanic plays out when you activate changes on the blockchain, right? I think for the, like, Callum, what you were saying about informing like the token holders about different changes, I've done that a lot in the past when it comes to like on-chain governance parameters. Most of the time, they don't understand it. There's a lot of time, like the people who come to these calls are like people who have a lot of context on, blockchain development and, design and like, how to, contribute to core development. But like the majority of people, you would have to like distill it in a way that they would have to understand it, especially if it's like complicated terminology, or even if it's like try to simplify it as much as possible. So you can still inform them, but there's no guarantee that they'll understand it, but they probably would vote anyways. So it becomes kind of like this weird thing where you have like non-engineers voting on engineering specifications and designs. One other example would be like, imagine if like back in the days of the internet, like the design of HTTP by the IETF, but would require somebody who's like a shareholder in the internet, but it's not technical, to vote on HTTP specification, which is it's a weird mechanism, right? So we can still inform them. It's just like I wouldn't expect them to fully understand it, just based on previous experiences. Okay. I don't know if anyone else had any thought. If not, we can move on to the next topic. I think the action item here is, at the very least, where folks are thinking about governance parameters, so like on-chain governance parameters, a lot more specifically because of the CIP 15 question. So there's probably going to be some kind of work stream related to either at least trying to align the two in a way, or make it less awkward as a mechanism. So there's probably going to be more updates over that in the future calls. Moving on, the final topic is what we talked about last week, I think, or no, 2 weeks ago. We need to start scoping out for the upcoming hard work for Celestia mainnet. So far, I think this is a question for Evan and Callum. What are the CIPs that are desirable for the next hard fork upgrade? And yeah.
Pretty much those four right there. CIP 6, CIP 9, 10, and 12.
Okay. And for CIP 12, I believe for CIP 12, we probably need to talk to the IBC team about it, to see if it's ready to be, like, if there's an implementation. I'm guessing there's an implementation elsewhere in a different network that can be.
Yeah, I would feel comfortable moving it to final.
It would still have to go for last call, and we can move it to last. Yeah, so we can move it to last call. I just need to talk to the team about it, because the author ideally have to be here and champion their proposals, but we can help them steer it along. So it sounds like as in these four, right?
Yep.
Cool. I would recommend, I think as a next step would be to scope out a meta CIP with a name for the hard fork. We don't really need a date for now. It's because, it depends on the readiness of stuff. And like a list of the CIPs, desired CIPs to be included, which are these four. It's going to be like straightforward. We can talk about it offline. I can share some example templates and stuff for that. And I think there'll have to be a name for the hard fork coming up, which we can worry about later.
I think from the chat, CIP 14 will also be included there. But it's still in draft.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, we have 10, 14, 9, 12, and 6.
CIP 14 is also, this is the one for the ICA thing, right? But is it complete? It looked like it needs test cases. But other than that, like if the author adds test cases, we can move it to review and then last call. So it sounds like I need to talk to Susanna and team about 14, and I believe, what was the other one? 12. 14 and 12 to see like the status of that, so we can accelerate it along, presuming that the implementation is there. All right, cool. Anything else for hard fork stuff?
Cool. I'm just curious what happens after. Sorry, guys. I'm just curious what happens after last call. You said that there's a final 2-week period.
So after last call, like if there's no comment or feedback, or the author don't want to, like if they don't, like if there's no changes to the spec that they really like, oh shit, I need to add this to the spec and stuff, it goes to final. Now, when it's final, it just means that the specifications that you wrote are final, and it's been aligned on by the core devs, right? So then after it goes to final, then it's up to the core dev who are, who own, like when I talk about core dev, I mean like those who are building the client. So if there's another client team as well that is adding those changes, they would have to like implement those changes, presuming we agree that those changes that are in the final status are required for the hard work. But there's other ways of activation. Just because something final doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be added to our hard work. Like there's, a lot of other details, like is the code ready? Has it been tested and stuff? So, but at least final, what it means that the specification and the reference implementations are final. Like this is the correct way to add this feature, and this is how do you do it and stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Sweet. Okay, so we still have like a bit of minute. I will make this short. So my question is, does Tuesdays work for everyone, or do you prefer Wednesdays? Now would be a good time for feedback. Either or, both work.
Is there,
Anyone else?
I was thinking maybe, is there a day that really doesn't work for people?
Yeah, which day is
Doesn't.
worse, Wednesday or Tuesday? All right, I guess everyone's like
Well, Tuesday
a
is
little
better.
shy. Okay.
Because Wednesday we have no meeting day on Celestia Labs, right?
Yeah, I think like that point is fair. It's just that the CIP process is for it also includes external core devs as well. And I think like Wednesday, because I think like that's why the IBC team couldn't make it, because it was on Wednesday. Let's play around with Tuesday for another call and see if it works fine for everyone. So Rock or Care Bear, can we schedule a call for 2 weeks from now for Tuesday? And we'll call it Core Dev Call 5. We'll create a ticket for it. And Josh, for anything that requires last call that we agreed on, the deadline should be Tuesday, 2 weeks from now.
Yep, the 20th.
Sweet. With that said, well, thank you everyone for coming to another Core Dev call. Hope you guys enjoyed, and a lot of exciting stuff happening on Celestia. And yeah, take care.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey.
Bye.